Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. We're going to be spending some time throughout this whole broadcast today looking at a variety of different issues. Just a few minutes, Afshin Ziafat will be with us, and if that name sounds vaguely familiar, he is an individual we've had in studio with us before, former Muslim, converted to Christianity, now the pastor of Providence Church in Frisco. And for those of you watching online, and again, you can watch this online at pointofview.net or also on Facebook Live, I'm holding up the August issue of Outlook, in which we actually have some of the material that we collected from his interview on reaching your Muslim neighbors. So we'll be talking about that with him in the first hour today. Then a little bit later, Mary DeMuth will join us. We'll be talking about the issue of abuse. She has, of course, written this very significant book on the subject and has written about this in the past, by the way. Also is doing a writers' conference, so I'll talk about that and some things that might be helpful to some of you that believe that you have a book in you but don't know kind of how to write it, how to promote it, and all the rest. So we'll get into that. And in the third hour, even though many of you are listening on a radio station, which maybe does not carry that third hour, although we are carried on about 200-plus stations anyway, you certainly can go to our website, pointofview.net, and watch the program, listen to the program, or go to Facebook. And that is, we'll have our good friend Noel Bouché from Pure Hope talking about everything from pornography to human trafficking and a lot of other issues that will be front and center. And I have not posted a whole lot of articles today, which some people said, why didn't you post articles? Because we didn't get to the ones we talked about yesterday that we posted. And one of those articles is an article by our friend David French, because if nothing else, maybe it helps us understand a little bit more about this flap at the New York Times. Now, if you're not familiar, you have two individuals that have been reporters for the New York Times that wrote a book about the confirmation hearings related to, of course, Brett Kavanaugh, who is now Justice Kavanaugh. And those are opportunities for individuals who have been reporters to then, in a sense, write a book. Many times people say that books are reporters' sketch notes that are now reflected upon, and then history is the reflection on some of those books. So this is a really opportunity to try to, once we move past, and sadly we only moved 11 months past, all the hue and cry and everything to get it right. Well, the New York Times did not get it right. The New York Times took something that they thought was sort of a blockbuster statement in the book and then blew it up, where almost all of the other, if you would say, mainstream media ignored it or actually recognized that there was something else that was more of a bombshell or a blockbuster, whatever metaphor you want to use. And a lot of this had to do with the claim about something supposedly that Brett Kavanaugh did when he was a college student at Yale. And I won't go into what it is because it's a really awful statement, first of all, if it happened, and I doubt that it did. But even if it did, first of all, that was a long time ago. And second of all, the point that is made is that the person who Blasey Ford claimed was assaulted actually didn't remember anything like this. Matter of fact, her words in the book are, "It would be impossible for me to be the only girl at a get-together with three guys, have her leave, and then not figure out here she's getting home," she said. "I just really don't have any confidence in the story." That's what one of those individuals looking at this said. Of course, we've already pointed out that the woman that this happened to also didn't recall anything like this or any others like it. And even more, the two authors uncovered a pressure campaign to get this woman to alter her testimony in order to back Dr. Ford. Okay. Well, interestingly enough, that individual told the writers, I was told behind the scenes that certain things they would spread about me if I didn't comply. And so as a result, they were going to ruin her reputation. Well, to me, that's the bombshell revelation. That's the blockbuster revelation. And let's give credit where credit is due. CBS. CBS News reported a new sexual misallegation against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh fueled impeachment calls from Democratic presidential candidates. Former Yale classmates claim he exposed himself. I won't go into all the details. But interesting enough, Jan Crawford with CBS said, we report tonight the real bombshell, and that is Christine Ford's close high school friend, who Ford says was at the party when Kavanaugh supposedly assaulted her, said that Ford's story is not believable, told the FBI that these individuals that by Ford and others pressured her, threatened her, and actually were going to engage in a smear campaign. So CBS reported it accurately. Washington Post, it reported it accurately as well. This is one of the statements from the Washington Post as Democrats go big on calling for Kavanaugh's impeachment, despite the key clarification from the Times that the supposed victim of this new alleged assault didn't recall it, or that Kaiser's account isn't one they can ignore. And, of course, also, as we might point out, that she was being pressured. We're just going to ruin your reputation if you don't agree with this. So, anyway, back to David French's article, which we posted yesterday. It's not up there today, but it was up there yesterday, and you can find it. So he says, given the facts, what does the New York Times do? Oh, rather than feature the blockbuster, it ran with this incredibly odd new allegation against Brett Kavanaugh. It wasn't truly new. The Senate knew about it before, that Friends did something, which I won't go into, and they withhold from readers the fact that the alleged victim would not speak to the reporters and told Friends that she had no memory of the incident. So this has been something to sully the New York Times. But just before we go to the break, let me try to also, what Gary Bauer talks about, connect the dots. Because Gary Bauer will be on with us tomorrow, because he pointed out that, of course, it's just been 11 months since, of course, Brett Kavanaugh, his wife and daughters have been put through the confirmation process that was just horrible. And Christine Blasey Ford had zero evidence for those charges. And, of course, he made it onto the court just barely because many of the liberals on the court, many of the liberals in the Senate recognized that he could be the fifth vote to restrict abortion. So rather than simply say, well, that is old news, they simply came back at him again. Tomorrow when we have Gary Bauer on, I will have him go into more detail. But he talks about, again, how the New York Times actually had to post a correction, but then didn't even acknowledge that they had made a mistake. And, of course, as I just mentioned, according to Gary Bauer's piece here, the Washington Post refused to publish those allegations. But nevertheless, that is the case. And even CNN said that the Times fiasco was the latest in a series of high-profile blunders. And finally, Gary Bauer points out the fact that it isn't just the issue of abortion. He points out that last month, progressive senators filed a brief at the Supreme Court in a gun control case. And in there, they had this not-so-veiled threat telling the justices that the Supreme Court is sick. And they argued that it was time for the Supreme Court to heal itself before the public demands it be restructured. And the argument, I think, is boiled down, as Gary Bauer puts it, we can no longer count on the court to force radical left-wing social change, so unless you produce results we like, we will restructure the court. So that's just kind of a look, first of all, at how the New York Times is being criticized even by others in the mainstream media. And I think it really makes the case, again, why I encourage you to consider what you might do to support Point of View, because we really want to tell you the truth. And even one of the most respected news organizations did not. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
A major campaign issue is health care. Americans are upset with the high cost of health care, and although many candidates are promoting the idea of Medicare for all, it won't bring down cost and has a little chance of passing anyway. So we should be asking if there are any ways to bring down the cost of health care. Fortunately, we have some companies and states that have been able to do so with relatively minor changes. Sean Flynn describes two of these changes. The first solution is price tags. As I've discussed in previous commentaries, it's nearly impossible for people with health insurance to find out what a procedure will cost and how much will be covered by insurance. When patients have been able to comparison shop, LASIK eye surgery is a good example, competition has brought the cost down. A second solution is deductible security. This pairs an insurance policy that has an annual deductible with a health savings account that is funded with an amount equal to the annual deductible. The sponsor could either be a private employer like Whole Foods or a government like the state of Indiana. Since the amount is equal to the annual deductible, participants have money to pay for out-of-pocket expenses. This not only provides them with cash to spend on medical expenses, but it also makes them participants. They get to keep unspent health savings account balances. That causes them to be more conscious of cost in comparison shop. The state of Indiana tracked health care spending and discovered that these behavioral changes resulted in 35% lower spending compared to traditional health insurance, and they also found that employees were still going in for mammograms, annual checkups, and other forms of preventive medicine at the same rate. If we want to lower health care costs, these are two time-tested solutions that will achieve it. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
Point of View, Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Power, love, and a sound mind. Again, that is 2 Timothy 1:7. And if you go to the website right now, pointofview.net, you're going to find a couple of things. First of all, an opportunity for you to join with us. And we're really calling for especially those of you this hour that maybe are new listeners and certainly could be new donors. So if you can help us out financially, we would greatly appreciate that. And even a small gift will be greatly appreciated, and it will be doubled. I might just announce right now that we have a $15,000 matching fund right at this moment. And as you are supporting this ministry, in just a few minutes, you'll hear from Pastor Afshin Ziafat, who actually is the pastor of Providence Church. And one of the things that we make available to you for your gift is the Outlook magazine. I'm holding this up right now, and the August issue talks about reaching your Muslim neighbor. Really want to do what we can to equip you to make a difference and to reach out to your community. And you may have Muslims in your community and you say, I really don't know how to share Christ with them. I really don't even know how to start a conversation. I don't know what kind of questions they might ask that I don't have answers for. And this is what we really want to do to equip you to make a difference in your community. So if nothing else, one of the reasons we certainly talk about your support of Point of View is we want to equip you to make a difference in your culture, in your community. You've heard Jim Dennison on this program before talk about the fact that, look, he can certainly reach a lot of people in his sphere of influence, but he's never going to reach the people in your sphere of influence. That's what you can do. And so we really want to equip you to make a difference, and that's one of the reasons why we make available to you the Outlook magazine and your monthly gift. It could be $1 a day, $30 a month. We've done that before. We also have a level which is called the Liberty Club level, which is $50 a month, and that includes not only, of course, the Outlook magazine, but our booklets, as well as this attractive tumbler, and we'll talk more about that in the next hour. But we certainly want you to recognize that we want to equip you to make a difference. And back to a point that I made just a minute ago, the article we posted yesterday by David French, the New York Times still doesn't understand what it did. And I think it illustrates that there has been this full court press against Brett Kavanaugh because the other side recognizes that it is quite possible that the Second Amendment will be even strengthened with this gun control issue before the court right now, that Roe versus Wade might actually be overturned and returned back to the states, that further religious liberty victories will take place. And so, if nothing else, you're not only equipping yourself and others to do that, but I want to use a couple of illustrations. You know, you've always heard about the Dutch boy putting his finger in the dike. Some of you that are older might know this better than some of you that are younger, but you can recognize that there is a sense in which right now we're sort of holding back what will take place. And just the incredible amount of response and anger and vitriol that have come against Brett Kavanaugh, who is just one of 9 Supreme Court justices, should tell you everything about the level of frustration and the desire to bring about very significant changes. I quoted just a minute ago from Gary Bauer, who made it real clear that some of these not-so-veiled threats coming from, for example, this friend of the court brief, this amicus brief before the Supreme Court said, look, you've got to either heal the court or we're going to restructure the court, and they recognize that they are starting to lose ground. This week, you probably heard us talk about the fact that we have 150 different federal judges that have been confirmed to the federal bench, 105 to the federal district court, 43 to the circuit court, and 2 to the Supreme Court. And those are numbers from a week ago. I've already heard that we've increased that dramatically just in the last couple of days and will continue to do so. So they recognize that they are losing. And in some respects, the way we sort of hold back that tide is through what we're going to be doing over the next approximately 18 months, educating people about what the candidates are saying, educating people about what will happen if a certain candidate wins the election next November, and then going into, interestingly enough, those first few days in January when either a newly elected president or a re-elected president wants to implement his or her agenda. So those are the kinds of things that you are supporting. And so we are really dedicated to actually bringing about the change. I mentioned the one metaphor. We'll come back to the other one in just a minute as well, and that's the so-called frog in the kettle, frog in the pan. I recognize, I've talked to some biologists say, well, that isn't always the case, but it's such a good metaphor. It doesn't always have to be totally scientifically accurate. The theory was, and I think you can still find examples of that if you put a frog, which is an amphibian, in water, it just adapts to the temperature of the water. And so you could heat up the water and it wouldn't jump out of the pan because it would just be happening so slowly that it wouldn't realize that it was boiling to death. And you could use this illustration with some of these people that have turned up their hot tub a little bit too much, go drinking, and then are found dead in their hot tub. Sometimes they don't realize what's happening because it's happening incrementally. Well, that's exactly what's been happening in our culture. It doesn't look so incremental now when we see the full court press against, indeed, the Supreme Court nominee and now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And by the way, if you think it has been crazy this time, just imagine if Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Stephen Breyer or someone else has to step down. The hue and cry, the conflict is going to be greater than you've ever seen before. So really at the core of all this is the issue of abortion. And let me, for just a minute before we take our next break, just talk about the fact that in many ways we talk about victories. And one of those is in the issue of life. We now have something that has just been reported by the Guttmacher Institute, which was formerly affiliated with Planned Parenthood and still ideologically agrees. So you can obviously see that they're not going to publish this unless it's really true. And they are now reporting that the number of abortions for the most recent year we have is the lowest since abortion was legalized in 1973. So in some respects, we're already sort of winning the war of ideas. Still, the numbers are 862,000, and even one death through abortion is lamentable. But when you recognize that we have actually, through all sorts of actions, lowered the number of abortions in America now to its lowest level since 1973, we're winning the war of ideas. Let me put a second one on in which we're winning the war of ideas, and that is the fact that just the other day, when I was speaking for the Council for Life, which is an organization here in Dallas, by the way, there's also Council for Life in Fort Worth. I've spoken for them too, by the way. Anyway, Council for Life had me speak on Pro-Life 101. And we also pointed out that there are approximately 3 times as many pregnancy resource centers in America as there are abortion clinics in America. So the word of life is heading out in ways that we never would have anticipated structurally even a few decades ago. Now, candidly, we should have had pregnancy resource centers in the 1970s. Because of that, we might not have had a Roe versus Wade decision. But anyway, the church has stepped up, Christian organizations have stepped up, and we have pregnancy resource centers everywhere. So that's number 2. So first of all, the number of abortions have dropped. Number 2, we also have the number of pregnancy resource centers, which is larger by a lot than the number of abortion clinics. And number 3, and you've heard me say this before, is, interestingly enough, we actually see that the younger you are, the more likely you are to be pro-life. Now, let me hasten to add that if you talk to a typical millennial and ask, are you pro-life, they might go, oh, no, I don't even know what that means. So I'm not saying that they say, I'm pro-life. But when you ask them questions about whether or not they regard life in the womb as sacred, or whether or not they would themselves get an abortion or encourage someone else to get an abortion, they come up more often as a higher percentage with pro-life answers. So if nothing else, I hope that that motivates you to actually give to Point of View, because one of the things we encourage you to do is to take this information, some of which I just shared with you just the last couple of minutes, about what is happening right now in the New York Times, why there's such an attack on Brett Kavanaugh, how this could lead to an overturning of Roe versus Wade, and all these pro-life success stories. I want you to take that into your community and make a difference. But most importantly, I want to talk to some of you right now that are new listeners, and I want to invite you to become new donors. For any level, you can join with us. $1 a day, $30 a month. $30 a month becomes $60 a month. Maybe you say, look, I can only give you a $100 gift. Okay, you give us a call right now. $100 becomes $200. So let me encourage you to make this phone call. That number is 800-347-5151. 1-800-347-5151. But most importantly, I know a lot of you just simply are used to going on the internet. So I will encourage you to go to the website, pointofview.net. Click on that banner that says Join the Team and join with the Truth Team. Again, pointofview.net or 800-347-5151.
When you give to Point of View, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dyes would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kerby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penn Dexter and Kerby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy. But if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Whatever you give will be matched dollar for dollar. Don't put it off, because the clock is running out on the match. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation, and we are in the midst of our Truth Team Week, and really encourage you to give us a call, 800-347-5151, or simply you can go online, which one individual did, pointofview.net, increased giving to $50 a month, and so receives and will be receiving this attractive tumbler by Yeti, which keeps hot things hot and cold things cold, and was having some people talk about how long this actually keeps those various liquids cold or hot, depending on what you might want. Also, we receive the booklets that we send out on a monthly basis, and of course our Outlook magazine. While I mention the Outlook magazine, let me now, if I can, mention that the August issue of Outlook has an article there called Reaching Your Muslim Neighbor. What we did was take an interview that we did with our next guest, Pastor Afshin Ziafat, and summarize some of the material because it was so helpful to have an individual that grew up in Iran and actually learned the 5 pillars of Islam. His family then moved to Houston. He had a Christian woman that was reading books to him to teach him English and then gave him a New Testament, which later he read and believed, was, of course, disowned by his family, but it had some great material about how to reach out to our Muslim friends, neighbors, and coworkers, because oftentimes you say, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, and he certainly has provided some great insight in that regard. Might mention that Afshin Ziafat is the lead pastor in Providence Church in Frisco, Texas, helped launch the Vertical Bible Study at Baylor University, an individual that brings a wealth of ministry experience, and also, perhaps more than most of the people we've had on the program, gives us not only his own testimony of leaving Islam for Christianity, but giving us some great wisdom about how to reach out to those Muslims in our sphere of influence. So, Afshin, welcome back to Point of View.
Thank you so much for having me back on.
Talk about your own ministry for just a minute. A lot of our listeners this hour are listening in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So when I say Frisco, Texas, they know exactly where that is. When we're on the national show, a lot of people say, look, I live in another state than Texas, so I have no idea where that is. But talk about the ministry that you have right there in Providence.
Yeah, Frisco is a rapidly growing suburb of Dallas, just north of Dallas, and my church is called Providence Church, and we are located right in the main, center of Frisco, really right off of Preston Road, if those of you who are from Dallas know. But Providence Church has been going for about 15 years, and was planted out of the Village Church from another church here in the Dallas area. Sure. And I've been the pastor now for 9 years. So it's been fun. And in the 9 years we've been here, we've planted 3 churches in the area. So it's been exciting to see God move.
Let's see if we can get into one of the topics I thought would be very helpful, because this week one of the things we're working on is helping people understand that as they support Point of View, we provide them with information, perspective, whether it's evangelism, politics, apologetics of various kinds of worldview issues, whatever it might be. We're really trying to equip them to make a difference in their sphere of influence. And I would imagine virtually every listener right now says, I have a Muslim friend, or at least an acquaintance. You know, there's maybe somebody that I wave to as we walk in the neighborhood, or there's somebody that works in my area of business or in my office complex. How do I begin to even develop a friendship and an outreach to those individuals? Can you give us some ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think the begin to develop a relationship in your question is really the key. I think I would just really encourage them to do the work of building that relationship, of investigating and asking the right questions, and then looking for bridges to be able to get to the gospel. And so, I think, asking them questions about what they believe about eternal matters, what they believe about God, what they believe about life, and what their pursuit in life is, and get to know them. And, I think I always say when you start there and you even ask them how you can pray for them, I would say, the Lord can use that. I've never had a Muslim say to me, I don't want you to pray for me because you're a Christian. You know, they've always shared, and that lets you know what their needs are. And man, so many times God will call you to meet the needs that they have in their life, or to, again, as I said, look for a bridge to the gospel from that conversation.
And again, that idea of can I pray for you? I've had a lot of people simply say that you rarely have somebody turn down, can I pray for you? And especially even the Muslim world, because you sort of think, well, maybe they'd say, well, you're a different kind of believer, so I wouldn't want you to pray for me. But I've never seen anyone turn them down. But maybe the question I would have also, that I think some of our listeners might have, is, are they that spiritually curious? And your own story is kind of interesting, because your second grade woman, that I can't really say your teacher, but kind of your tutor, if you will, gave you a New Testament. But by the time you were in high school, you kind of got interested in that. And your interest in spiritual things is, I think, pretty typical. Many Muslims that I run into tend to be very kind of curious about, what do Christians believe, and do you really agree with everything happening in the country right now? And what do you think about some of the things that we have been taught in the past? There tends to be a fair amount of spiritual curiosity, doesn't there?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, first, what that lady did for me was really, she earned the right to be heard by me, by the way that she was meeting a need in my life. So for me, the need was English. And so there might be somebody in your life that's from a Muslim background that is new to the area or new to the country even, and really just needs help assimilating. And so she earned the right to be heard. And so what I mean by that is, when she gave me the New Testament, this lady had already been pouring into me, loving me, and so I held on to it. And so now, when I grew older, I did become curious about the things of Christ, and really it was the person of Christ. Who was he really? Because I was taught that he was just a prophet, but I was hearing from others that they believe he's God. So I would say to the listeners, it might be that the Muslim in your area, I mean, there's obviously a range. A lot of them might just be nominal Muslims, and they may just see it as being, well, I'm from this area of the world. I'm from Iran, and so of course I'm a Muslim. And so that's why I say to let them share what they believe, and you might be shocked that maybe they don't even have a strong knowledge of the Islamic faith, and then from there to be able to invite them in and say, can I share with you what I believe about God and what I believe about Jesus, and go into the gospel.
As a matter of fact, in the August issue, we have a whole section that I've written on evangelism and the nuns. Those would be the people that really, when asked a question on a survey, basically say none, atheist, agnostic, or no preference. And frankly, some of the Muslims I run into sort of fit into that category as well. And then Nick Pitts has written a piece called Ask Better Questions, because he's talking about how to really reach out to the millennials. So in some respects, you're wise if you don't necessarily try to make too many assumptions. Oh, you're a Muslim, so you must believe, because that may not be the case. And the other point you said, just in passing, is worth something as well. I've heard a number of people say that if you go and just mow the lawn of your Muslim neighbor, they're going to go, why in the world did you do that? Because that's just not something that they are used to seeing. And you talk about building a bridge or taking care of something that they might have a need for, that opens the door almost instantaneously, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so, because again, in their whole mindset, the Islamic religion essentially is you have to do these 5 pillars of faith. You have to do all these things, and then God will approve you. So in a sense, they understand, I think, what true Christian love is, that that God loved us, even while we were yet sinners. And so when you love someone without trying to get anything in return, that's going to blow them away, because at first they're going to think, well, you're doing this for a reason. You're trying to get something from me. And again, because that's the mindset that they come from, that I have to do these things to get this from God. So when you can do that, in a sense, you're actually living out the gospel for them, that we were loved when we didn't deserve it, and before we did anything to even come close to deserving it, and not that we ever could. And so I would say that. And also on the whole thing about not making assumptions, also just to know that they're probably going to assume a lot about Christianity.
Very true.
That they're going to think that just because they're going to equate America to Christianity, and so to be able to show them that, look, there's a lot of things in America that actually do not represent Christianity, and to be able to articulate those things, because I think they look at what's happening in America and some of the things that our culture embraces and says, well, how could you believe in Christianity? And so, you You have to make that distinction.
Very good. We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll chat for a few more minutes with Afshin Ziafat and also talk about how those of you in the pastorate can provide education to the congregation. So I have a lot more to cover, and we will do so right after this.
Point of View Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
John Stonestreet.
We all know how rare it is to get the sort of cutting-edge biblical analysis of current events and cultural issues that you get every single day at Point of View. But Point of View can't do it without the support of listeners. I encourage it. If you benefit from Point of View, show your appreciation by praying for the ministry and seriously consider financially supporting Point of View. The church needs what it provides.
And again, John Stonestreet reminding you that what you do helps you and others to make an impact on the culture. And one of the reasons we're talking with Afshin Ziafat for a few more minutes is, of course, the incredible impact that he's had over the years. Of course, a while was actually traveling nationally and internationally proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. And still, I know, does some of that. He, of course, is the lead pastor of Providence Church and an individual that is somebody that we felt so highly about in terms of some of his news and information and some of his insights. Some of that material is in the August issue of Outlook. I might just mention that, of course, we have a lot of books. Here's my book on understanding Islam and terrorism. Here's the Spanish version of it, so you can get it in either English or Spanish. One of the booklets we make available to people that actually give at $50 a month was a book on the idea of Sharia law, and we'll have others in that regard as well. And we're in the midst of our Truth Team Week, and already we have $2,750 actually matched. So that is encouraging. We started with $15,000 match fund. We're now down to $12,250. Just to give you an idea, I mentioned ago an individual that upsized from $45 a month to $50 a month to receive those booklets. So that $50 a month becomes $600, which is matched. So that's $1,200. Another individual online gave $250, and that will be $500 in terms of the match. So that just gives you an idea of some of the progress we'll be making today as we address those issues. But Afshin Ziafat, let me come for you to just a minute, talk about what we can do from the pastorate, what we can do from the pulpit, what churches can do, because this whole particular issue that we addressed is evangelism. And as an individual who first was traveling, like almost a traveling evangelist, you recognize how important evangelism is. And now as a pastor, you also have that hat. So speak to this for just a minute. We have pastors listening to this program. We have Sunday school leaders listening to this program. We have elders and deacons listening to this program. What would you suggest to them? Because I think we need to do a lot more equipping the body of Christ on how to reach out to whether it's Muslims or nuns, evangelicals reaching out to millennials or the Gen Z. There's just a real need for us to equip people inside the church, don't you think?
Yes, and I would say I think it begins with casting a vision for the role of the church. And the church is, we are called to be an outpost, a kingdom outpost. And every member of the church is an ambassador for Christ, not just the pastors and the elders and the deacons. And in fact, the elders' role, according to Ephesians chapter 4, is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So I would say to pastors and leaders to really cast that vision for your church that we are to be an incarnational people and not an attractional church. And what I mean by that, an attractional church is you bring the non-Christians to Sunday church and let me tell them about Jesus. And by the way, that's not bad to bring a non-Christian to church, but that shouldn't be all we do. What we should be doing is we are equipping the saints, those who are there, to go and just as Jesus, and this is the reason we use the word incarnational, just as Jesus put on human flesh and came into our world, that's what we speak of as the incarnation. We as children of God are to go into our world, wherever God has you, to be on mission. And so that's what we want to say. If you're a doctor, if you're an engineer, if you're a high school student, you need to say that not just what you do for a living as a area of the world is your ministry. So that's the thing. I would just say, just cross over into their world. I just think of how, Paul in Acts in Athens, he went into the marketplace and he went into the synagogue where the people were. And so, again, incarnate yourself, but then invite them into your life. Get to know them, ask them the right questions. And then eventually we have to prepare people to share their story and then to share Christ, his story. And people, know that I have a phenomenal testimony of what God did of pulling me out of Islam, and they say, I wish I had that powerful of a testimony. And I want to tell people, no, every one of us, if you're a follower of Christ, has a powerful story. And by the way, I'm studying and preaching Hebrews 11 to our church, and Hebrews 11 says that the men and women of faith, they obtained a testimony. In other words, as they lived out their faith, they obtained a testimony. And so testimony isn't just let me tell you what happened when I became a Christian, but let me tell you what God is doing in my life today. So equip people to walk with Jesus so that they will always have something to share about what God is doing in their life. And then ultimately to, as 1 Peter 3 says, to be ready to give a reason for the hope that they have within them.
And again, you can find out more about what he is doing up there at Providence Church. It's providencefrisco.com. Of course, we have a link on our website there. Their mission is to glorify God by making disciples through the gospel in community and on mission, and have a very extensive program of discipleship. So if you would like to visit that church, you can do so. And if nothing else, I just appreciate the fact that when you were here last time, you shared some of these very helpful ideas about how to reach out to your Muslim neighbor. We put it in the Outlook articles that were actually in our evangelism outreach that we did in August. And I just appreciate you giving us some time today during Truth Team. So thank you so very much, and look forward to the next opportunity.
Thank you, Kerby. I really appreciate it.
Let me just, before we take a break, say a couple of things. First of all, we encourage you to make a gift, and your monthly gift then, of course, qualifies you to receive the Outlook magazine. And if you find yourself saying, you just said some great things about evangelism, can I get a back issue? Sure, you can contact us. We're a little busy right now in the midst of Truth Team, but you can send us a note, and we'll see if we could give you that August issue so that you can begin to see how to reach out to the different groups we talked about, those who are the religiously unaffiliated, those who are maybe the millennials, those who are Muslims, and a variety of others. And so that's one of the benefits that you receive as you give to Point of View. Now, I have mentioned that for your gift of $50 or more monthly, that's $600 for the entire year, and that's matched right now because we still have our $15,000 match on the table. And you'll receive not only those booklets I mentioned, but the 20-ounce tumbler that keeps beverages either hot or cold for several hours. And this is something that you would find very helpful. And as an addition to those booklets, of course, they're only available to our donors. So, again, this is something you get only through Point of View. But, again, your gift of any amount is something that helps us continue this broadcast. And as I mentioned, your gift will be doubled. But just for a minute, let me talk about the fact that a number of you probably are listening to this program for the first time. We've only been on this particular set of radio stations this hour over about a year or so. So most likely you're a new listener, and you may be a new donor. And if you are a new donor, I want to say thank you for your gift. But for those of you that have been listening for a while, let me encourage you to become a new donor. If you've never given it before, your gift will connect you to the Point of View message like never before. And because we have this match challenge, that is the case. And again, as I mentioned, we have a Liberty Club level, which is $50 a month or more. But we also have a Century Club level. Those of you in the Dallas area might be familiar with Gene Getz, but his new Life Essentials Interactive Study Bible, you can only get it from us, and that's something else we would add at that level. If you'd like to know more, simply go to the website, pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You can find out more right there, and we'll be back right after this.
When you give to Point of View, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dies would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kerby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penn Dexter and Kerby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy. But if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Whatever you give will be matched dollar for dollar. Don't put it off, because the clock is running out on the match. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information. about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. Let me just mention, just a few minutes, we're going to be talking with our good friend Mary DeMuth, and we'll talk about this issue of abuse. And also, of course, she has been able to train so many people in Christian writing, so we'll talk about that. And in the next hour, Noel Bouché will be in studio with us, interestingly enough. He is with Pure Hope, and we'll be talking about everything from pornography to human trafficking. And again, we'll be talking about a lot of negatives, but how about a positive to start out with? And that is the Guttmacher Institute, which is associated with Planned Parenthood, released its survey of abortions. And because they tend to be more pro-abortion, you can recognize that this is probably the news they did not want to put out, and that is the number of abortions in the most recent year that we have is the lowest since abortion was actually legalized in 1973. And so it's still a lot of lives being lost to abortion, but I think it illustrates again why we, the other day, were talking about this issue of Brett Kavanaugh, because as Gary Bauer, who will be with us tomorrow, points out in one of his commentaries, it's just been 11 months since Brett Kavanaugh and his wife and daughters were put through so much in the Senate confirmation process, and then it resurfaced again with some of these articles that appeared in the New York Times, which has now, interestingly enough, lost an incredible amount of credibility, been criticized by everybody from CNN to the CBS and the Washington Post and others, because they simply did not report the story accurately and did not actually talk about what many people thought was the real bombshell. Not that there was, again, the same allegation that when he was a student at Yale that he did something wrong, but actually that, first of all, the woman does not remember any of that, does not believe it happened, and somebody else who was supposed to testify was actually pressured and threatened that they would actually ruin her reputation if she did not comply with what was being reported. And all of that goes back to, of course, this issue of abortion. Brett Kavanaugh made it on the Supreme Court with a very narrow vote because a lot of the liberals, both on the court and the liberals in the Senate, recognized that he probably could be the swing vote, the fifth vote on this issue of abortion. So, first of all, the number of abortions is lower than it's ever been since abortion was legalized.
Praise God.
Number two, we also, of course, have talked about the fact that we have more pregnancy resource centers than we have abortion clinics, 3 times as many, by the way. And then also, the younger you are, the more likely you are to be pro-life. So we'll start with a positive story. I'm going to bring another one here in just a minute. But, of course, you heard the voice of Brad Fisk, who's been with us all week during our Truth Team. And since we are going to be talking about some difficult topics today, like abuse and pornography and trafficking, I wanted to also say that there are a lot of victories out there as well.
There is. This morning I was blessed with USA Today headline, the very story you just went through about abortions are down. And praise God for that. Thank you, Lord. Boy, I'm telling you, that's just a huge thing, just huge. And, we happen to be in the middle of a thing called Truth Team Week.
Right.
And, Kerby, why do we do this? Why do we stop in 1 week, 2 weeks a year total to do this? Why are we doing Truth Team? Why why do we raise money? Why do we need to?
And that's a good question, why? And the why is that, first of all, we want to equip you to make a difference in your community. We just gave you some facts and figures. You can find some of those. As a matter of fact, even the article yesterday by David French is there, so it's available to you so that you can talk about how the New York Times has lost its credibility because it doesn't tell the whole story. It also illustrates why we encourage people to support us, because we really truly try to tell you the story. And sometimes it's sad, and we'll say, this is one place where we haven't been very successful. But we have an agenda to tell you the truth, not an agenda to fit some ideological profile.
That's right.
And really, we want to equip you to make a difference. As a matter of fact, today, you're going to be hearing from two individuals who have been equipped to actually make a difference in their sphere of influence. They've taken sometimes some difficult situations in the case of Mary DeMuth, or some real desires in the case of Noel Bouché, and have really had a profound impact. But we don't want you to feel that you're just going to give to them or give to us. We want to equip you to make a difference in your community. And all week during this Truth Team week, we've been featuring some of the individuals. And a couple of times, Brad, you said, I really don't know who these people are. Well, that's exactly what we intended.
That's right.
Some of these people have high profile. Some of them do not. But the point is whether you have a high profile or a low profile, whether God has gifted you with an incredible social media platform, or you can just talk to your neighbors across the street, we want to equip you to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world.
There's something about Point of View that I think is very, very unique, and that is you're the everyday man person. You're the normal guy, the normal dad. You've got kids, grandkids, you have activities, and there's something about the everyman level that I think is very vital here. I really believe it's part of the Point of View DNA, you might say, of being here for just the regular guy, the regular gal, for equipping, for encouraging, and that you listen to us, you'll know what's going on.
Yes.
And I think that is so critical, and that's why we do stop down and we say, you know what? We are listener-supported radio. We're a listener-supported program. And so we cannot, in fact, we will not be able to do the job unless we have you standing with us financially. May I give the phone number? Here it is. You'll hear it many times. In fact, I'll give you the website first, pointofview.net. Right there on the homepage, they're going to see a banner they can click on.
Yeah.
Pointofview.net. Or you can call us and talk to one of our lovely phone volunteers, 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151.
And again, one of the reasons we encourage you to make a difference is because you're finding in your community some things that are disturbing. And a little bit later, I'm going to share this piece that we're going to post, and that is George Packer Gets Mugged by Reality. This is a guy that's a liberal who would obviously identify himself as a progressive, writes all sorts of liberal kinds of articles and books and those kinds of things, sent his kid off to school, and after a while was horrified by what was happening in his own school with his own child. And so it just illustrates that it's not just a couple of conservatives or a couple of, narrow-minded Christians that are saying something's wrong in America. I'm going to read from that a little bit later, and I'm even encouraging Penadextra to do a commentary on that.
Good.
Because one of the things that since the founding of Point of View, when Marlon Maddox started in 1972, and I started actually being a guest in 1980 and then a guest host since 1986, is he was concerned about the fact of what's happened to the public schools. And we're reaping the sad reality of what is happening. But even the liberals, even people that write for the New York Times are starting to say, there's something seriously wrong here. What has happened? So this is just one more reason why you need to join with us. And I want to talk to some of you that are new to the program. Maybe you've just started listening, and a little bit later we're going to read from somebody that started listening and said, this changed my whole mindset.
Incredible story. We're going to read later. Yep.
And again, I want to encourage some of you to maybe, since you're new listeners, to become new donors. And it can be just as simple as $10 a month, and or it could be $50 a month. You receive all sorts of benefits. And again, as you just pointed out a minute ago, we have a match, don't we?
We do have a match. It's a $15,000 dollar-for-dollar match. So every dollar you give is doubled. When you call us right now, 7 of you, please call us during the break. 800-347-5151. Call now.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
A major campaign issue is health care. Americans are upset with the high cost of health care, and although many candidates are promoting the idea of Medicare for all, it won't bring down cost and has a little chance of passing anyway. So we should be asking if there are any ways to bring down the cost of health care. Fortunately, we have some companies and states that have been able to do so with relatively minor changes. Sean Flynn describes two of these changes. The first solution is price tags. As I've discussed in previous commentaries, it's nearly impossible for people with health insurance to find out what a procedure will cost and how much will be covered by insurance. When patients have been able to comparison shop, LASIK eye surgery is a good example, competition has brought the cost down. A second solution is deductible security. This pairs an insurance policy that has an annual deductible with a health savings account that is funded with an amount equal to the annual deductible. The sponsor could either be a private employer like Whole Foods or a government like the state of Indiana. Since the amount is equal to the annual deductible, participants have money to pay for out-of-pocket expenses. This not only provides them with cash to spend on medical expenses, but it also makes them participants. They get to keep unspent health savings account balances. That causes them to be more conscious of cost in comparison shop. The state of Indiana tracked health care spending and discovered that these behavioral changes resulted in 35% lower spending compared to traditional health insurance, and they also found that employees were still going in for mammograms, annual checkups, and other forms of preventive medicine at the same rate. If we want to lower health care costs, these are two time-tested solutions that will achieve it. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/antisemitism. Viewpoints.info/antisemitism.
Point of View, Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Power, love, and a sound mind, and this is part of our Truth Team Week. Brad Fisk with us, and in just a minute we're going to talk to our good friend Mary DeMuth, and we'll talk about everything from abuse and We Too, the book, as well as some of the things she's done over the years to actually equip people to be writers. There's a writer intensive coming up, and all sorts of other ways in which she has ministered. More than 35 books. It would take hours to cover all the topics that Mary DeMuth has written about. But we just before we do that, really need to hear from some of our listeners, because first of all, we have a $15,000 match on the table.
Let me explain that.
Yes.
We have a friend of the ministry who's a very dear friend to us, and he said, I have some money that I would love to have you put in your total for your needs, financial needs. But you know what? You can't put it in until it's matched dollar for dollar by others in the audience. So it's now your opportunity to give, and every dollar you give will be doubled. We have a kind of the sweet spot of our gifts that we're doing is a $50 a month gift. And for that gift, they get, what do they get? There's a couple things they get.
Well, first of all, for $50 a month, we have this wonderful tumbler. It's a Yeti tumbler.
Yes.
Top of the line, keeps things hot or cold for hours. So that's one of the resources we want
Built
to put
like
in
a
your
tank,
hands.
man. It's really a cool service.
It's very nice. And, of course, then all these booklets that we have each month have a different booklet coming out. The most recent was on criminal justice, and one before that, Worldviews Through History, and on and on. Every one of those is available. And, of course, they receive the Outlook magazine.
That's right. I got an update. The match, we actually have a few people that have been checking in early on, and we're down to $12,000. $250 remaining. Isn't
There
that
you
great?
go. That's good.
So thank you so much for that progress we've made. And you know what? If just 20 people gave $50 a month right now, the entire match would be cared for. We'd love to have that done this hour, Lord willing. So please give us a call, 800-347-5151. It's pointofview.net, by the way. You can give online, but you can call us at 800-347-5151. Just before our guest comes on, how about 5 calls right now for the 5 people I'm looking at? And they're all waving to me and they're saying hi, and they want some phone calls. So 800-347-5151.
Let's go to our good friend Mary DeMuth, and she's just come back from a book tour. You know, when you do a book tour, from what I understand, it's like having a mug that's got a hole in it, and then they throw firecrackers in it after you're done. So I appreciate the fact that she's even willing to come on the program here. If you are familiar with Mary DeMuth, she's been on the program with me many times before. She's talking about how, and has talked about how Jesus can really transform a broken life. Her newest book, which we're going to do in much more detail later on, We Too, How the Church Can Respond Redemptively to the Sexual Abuse Crisis. Also has a great ministry of praying for individuals, and also has a writer conference coming forward. So Mary DeMuth, I don't even know how you get it all done, but it's just a delight to have you once again on Point of View with us.
Thanks so much, Kirby. It's great to be here.
Let's, if we can, just real quickly talk about why you have, over the years, been willing to come on Point of View. I mean, I remember when I first met you and you were writing about postmodernism. That goes back to 3 studios before the one we're sitting in right now. So we've known each other for a few years there. And you have still been willing to come on the program. And Brad, I'll tell you, you talk about busy woman. This is a busy woman. So it's not like she's looking for things to do.
Yeah, I got tired out just listening to you.
No. I think 35 books is what I hear, and that probably is a low number now. But nevertheless, why have you been willing to come on Point of View and share this message that you've had all these years with all of our listeners?
Well, mainly it's because I love Jesus, and I love to see him transform lives. I've experienced it myself, and I've had the privilege of watching others be transformed by the gospel. And I know that that's the heartbeat of Point of View, is to really talk about Jesus and what he does and how he intersects the culture that we live in.
And one of the things that you have in your website, of course, is where you can pray every day for individuals, but you also have a 21 Days to Healing, and sexual abuse is kind of a theme that we'll be talking with you about. In the next hour, Noel Bouché is going to be talking about some of that in terms of human trafficking, pornography, and the rest. But talk about that, because what you are actually implementing is a way in which some of our listeners that have been through just difficult circumstances, especially sexual abuse, that you're providing a way to begin to get healing. And I want to talk about that and then talk about what the church needs to be doing in that regard as well. But talk about what you're doing first.
Right. So I wanted to offer a free resource to people, and they can go to we2.org/21 days and get 21 days of emails in a row, so 3 weeks, of just all the best practices I've learned in the healing journey. And that, ranges from being prayed for to trauma therapy to, anything that's helpful for me along the way. I'm not a counselor, but I have been walking this journey a really long time. And then in terms of the church, my heart is to see the church rise up and become a haven for those who have been exploited this way. And there's good stories of churches doing great things, and then there's other stories we see on the news of churches not doing great things. And so I believe the Lord is just stirring us up to become a haven for the vulnerable.
And one of the things that you have in your book is a foreword by J.D. Greear, who's the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. He's been on the program with us before, but I know that when the Southern Baptist Convention met, you actually had a press conference because you and others were concerned that maybe the church isn't taking this as seriously as it should. Can you speak to that issue?
Yes, I think there's a lot of voices out there who feel like they've been saying this for a long time and it hasn't been listened to. One of the heartening things about being at the SBC convention, I was actually a messenger this year, so I got to be on the floor and I got to pray for people there from the stage, which is a huge blessing. As you know, I like to pray. And I was actually really heartened by what they have been trying to do over this past year. And I'll be speaking at the ERLC conference in October, and it's all about caring well and how to take care of those who have been harmed by this scourge. And they have a record number of people attending that. So we've got church leaders from all over the nation who are going to be attending and learning how to better equip their people and their leaders to deal with this issue.
Let's see if we can also talk about some of those resources before we take our next break. And that is, if you go to we2.org and others, you have a We2 manifesto, an award that you can provide. And then even, as I understand, coming soon, a study guide, so that some people that are saying this is something that we have ignored in the church for a long time and we need to do better. You're already starting to gear up with resources that would be helpful to make a difference inside the walls of a church, right?
Exactly. And the manifesto is just a really nice way of how to word how your church will be in this new day. Another thing that's really convenient is if you're a leader in a church, you can go to we2.org/pastors. And there's a 30-page PDF of all sorts of different kinds of resources, because I know that I am one little voice crying in the wilderness, but there are so many great resources out there. And so that's one of the things I talk about when I talk to pastors. They're overwhelmed, and they're like, I can't be an expert on this issue. I have so many other things I'm trying to do. And I try to say, you don't have to be an expert. You just need to be an empathetic listener and know how to refer well. And so we2.org/pastors will help them. This PDF has clickable links to take them to all sorts of resources for them and in their community.
So let's just take a break. But when we come back, Brad, I want to get into a couple of other issues, but some great resources there. There's a sexual abuse resource list. There are free resources for ministry leaders and pastors, and we have some of those links there. But we need to, before we come down to the end of this particular segment, see if we can get a few more people to make a phone call, because one of the reasons we're bringing these kinds of programs, of course, every single day, but even this week, is to remind you that we want to equip you to make a difference.
That's
and
right.
If this is an issue in your church, or if this is something you want to pass on to your pastor, or if you want to take a stand, we want to equip you. And as you give to this ministry, you're equipping yourself and other individuals to make a difference for Christ.
You know, there's other organizations and programs like ours, similar to ours, but, you know, they would be avoiding subjects like this, like the plague. They would just not be taking care of informing their audience really what they need to know. So that's another distinctive of what we like to do here. We're asking for 7 of you. We have 7 lines available right now. During this break, could we hear from 7 of you with a gift of any amount? Every dollar will be doubled up to $12,250. 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Now, we have a website you can give at as well, pointofview.net. pointofview.net. It's full participation time. We're looking for some help, and every dollar you give right now monthly, in other words, it's doubled. So you get $50 a month, it gets doubled to $100 a month.
So again, we need to hear from you. And again, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. That's just very simple. That will also give you some of the links we're talking about. Or we have people waiting to get your phone call, 800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled.
When you give to Point of View, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dies would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kerby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penn Dexter and Kerby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy. But if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Whatever you give will be matched dollar for dollar. Don't put it off, because the clock is running out on the match. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today about Truth Team Week, and Brad Fisk in studio with me, Mary DeMuth by phone. We'll get back to her in just a minute, but how are we doing in terms of the match? A $15,000 match, and certainly a number of people have called. We want to say thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
And as well, encourage some of our other listeners to join with us.
We're hovering right around the just below the $12,000 mark right now, so there's plenty of room for you to give us a call. In fact, I'd like to suggest that there would be 5 of you that would be be able to join us at what we call the Century Club level. That's $100 a month. It's only $1,200 a year. We've got a very cool Bible that's loaded. I mean, it's like a whole seminary in between the covers, and we explain that on our website very clearly what that's all about. And, of course, we have the Yeti tumbler, and that's a wonderful hot and cold drink kind of thing, and it's really, really a nice gift. It's just a thank you gift for being a part of the Truth Team family. You'd like to jump in, you'd like to be a part of this, every dollar you give will be doubled up to the $12,000 mark. So at $100 a month, Kerby, that's a great opportunity to really stretch your money. Pointofview.net is the website, pointofview.net. You can also call us at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151.
You know, we oftentimes talk about trying to provide as much information as possible to our listeners through Point of View. But as you pointed out just a minute ago, this is a topic that is avoided in a lot of Christian radio, not even necessarily always focused on in even some of the secular broadcasts as well. So, Mary DeMuth, let's again equip our pastors, because as you go to we2.org/pastors, there's a sexual abuse resource list that you have available. There are all sorts of other free resources that you want to put in their hands. And so if you're a pastor, a Sunday school teacher, or someone else, these are topics that need to be addressed from the pulpit, need to be addressed in the Sunday school class. But like you said, I'm not an expert on that, but the good news is you provided some of those resources so that they can share very important information with their congregation.
Yes, and it's really important that that we understand, you know, the plight of those who are leading congregations. There's just so much to do, and there's so much weight on their shoulders. So anytime we can equip them to serve well, I think is a big bonus and a plus.
One other thing I thought we wanted to bring on the table is we have always appreciated you, Mary, over the years to encourage writers. And you have been at many of the various writers' conferences that have been in the Dallas area. You have a writers' intensive overseas. But I thought we might talk about that for just a minute, because you are really working, even when you have some spare time, to encourage other people to tell their story. And while that is important in this issue of abuse, which you certainly have encouraged people to tell their story and to get their 21 days of healing, you also really have been over these years encouraging gifted writers like yourself to consider using that gift to advance the body of Christ.
Exactly, and I like to see the kingdom of God as a bunch of people doing things to further that kingdom instead of me competing with other people to get my message out, because it's all the same message, right?
Yep.
Sure. So the more people I can equip to do that and to help just brings me a lot of joy. I will be doing 2 different weeks in Geneva this year in October, November, and I'll be doing a major intensive here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in April. And in those places, I basically download everything I know about the writing industry, how to write, how to edit, how to publish, how to promote. And as you know, as you're working with your radio program, promoting is a big part of writing. And I'm in the middle of a book launch right now with this We Too book, and I'm tired. And I have to tell people that writing the book is, to me, relatively easy compared to the amount of time it takes to promote it.
That's right. Well, and let me just encourage people, if they haven't signed up for it, they may not even think about this, but I was in Switzerland this last year, and what a beautiful country, first of all. But a lot of people say, wow, how could I get all the way over there? Actually, it's not as expensive as you might think. So you have some overseas, you have some here. So consider that. And I know there are people out there that have a book inside them. And Mary is certainly somebody who brings an incredible amount of expertise, first in writing more than 30 books, but also is one of the better people out there that I've ever run into. And we always love to listen to her at these Christian Writers Conference on how to promote it, how to use social media. And Mary, you and I are old enough to remember the old days where you were dependent upon a publisher to get some information out. We know how well that didn't work. And now we can control our own destiny now because of social media. And so you are just becoming kind of a master at that and want to share all the tips and tricks with individuals that want to use that as well.
Exactly. And I think that's also a blessing and a curse, because there's like 10,000 things you could do. So it's amazing that it's in our hands now, but it's also hard that it's in our hands.
Just before I let you go, I thought maybe I'd have you just real briefly speak to our listeners. As you well know, we are listener-supported and dependent upon the financial gifts of our listeners to support this ministry. What would you say to some of those individuals who have been listening to Point of View maybe for a long period of time and never given a gift? What would you say to them?
I would say that it's to have a different perspective about it, that this is not about Point of View as much as it is about paying it forward into the kingdom. And this is enabling and empowering a well-known and ministry of integrity to help others, hear more about Jesus. And what a beautiful investment that is in the kingdom. This is kind of like making a down payment for what's going to happen in the future. And what a beautiful thing that is.
Well, again, we appreciate you being on the program and look forward to the next opportunity. I know you've been in the midst of a incredibly grinding kind of book promotion, and anybody that has done that, I certainly can at least punch that ticket a little bit, will understand what you've been through. So thank you so very much for giving us some time today here on Point of View.
Thanks so much.
Let's just, before we go to a break there, Brad, talk about that. She talked about pay it forward, and I'm looking at a sheet that you gave me a minute ago that said pay it forward. I mean, that's pretty good.
That's right.
And if you think about that, that really is the case.
It is.
When I first joined with Marlon Maddox back in the 1980s, there were people there that were supporting the ministry, which allowed for that ministry to thrive in the 1980s.
Yes.
Mary DeMuth and I crossed paths, I guess it was 20 years ago. I could be off a year or two, and that was before she had written 35 books. And certainly when you think about Gene Getz, interestingly enough, we're talking about his book, Life Essentials. Gene Getz has been in every single Point of View studio we've ever had.
That's great.
So some of these people we've known for a long time, but their message back in the 1980s, the 1990s, even the first century of the 21st century, first decade of the first 21st century, they were benefiting from people that had paid in the past. So we're asking you to pay it forward for those individuals that may just now be listening, or future individuals that will tune to this program and actually benefit because you're paying it forward.
We're a generational society. We have young people. We have young marrieds. We have parents, grandparents. And it's so important that we want to, first of all, we want to keep our culture and save our culture and bring it and turn the big ship back toward righteousness and back toward more biblical values. And we are simply asking you to help us do that. We are listener supported. We're not begging, not at all. We are basically saying that we have a need. We promise to come to you when we have a need, and we do. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. I'm looking in the phone room right now. Would love to see 4 people pick up the phones. Would you please be one of those 4? 800-347-5151.
A lot of people forget what a national show is, but here we have a gift from New Hampshire, another gift from Missouri, another gift from California. Some range from a $400 single gift, others to smaller gifts, others monthly gifts.
Texas, Georgia.
There you go. I mean, again, you can just begin to get a sense of a number of states in which we broadcast. Now, again, you're just listening in your local radio station, or I know a good number of people actually are listening online on their computers or even on the Point of View app on their phones. But wherever you might listen, you might understand that we are not just broadcasting to you, we're broadcasting to the nation, but we also want to equip you as an individual to make a difference. And certainly, as we've talked about this, pay it forward. There are going to be other listeners in the future that will benefit by your gift today.
That's right. And that's pointofview.net is the website that you can give on your own time, and it takes just a couple of moments. You can also give us a call. Impact the culture for Jesus Christ. Help turn things back that have slipped away from us, that we need to put our arms around and bring back into the fold of a biblical worldview. You can do that with your gift at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Looking for caller number 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 of you right now.
And so again,
and dollars are doubled, by the way.
That's right. Dollars are doubled.
Forgot to mention that.
And again, we have that matching fund, and it will take a little bit to carve that out today. But as we've pointed out before, you are the person to make a difference. So we're waiting for your phone call right now. Or you can simply go to the website, pointofview.net, or give us a call, 800-347-5151. Either way, you can make your pledge, and we want to hear from you, and we'll be back right after this.
Point of View Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
It would be tragic if Point of View did not exist, because not many programs are targeting areas where we need to learn how to think, where we need to learn how to respond, where we need to learn what our options are for active involvement, even how we can share truth with other people. And because Point of View is relevant, dealing with relevant topics, with real people, presenting real answers, it's right where people are, and it's meeting a very real need. This is a wonderful opportunity you have to literally help the ministry be the most effective that it can be through your gifts, through your financial support. I highly recommend it.
Again, some comments from June Hunt. And matter of fact, the two kind of go-to people that we've used over the years, Brad, on this issue of sexual abuse have been Mary DeMuth and June Hunt. And of course, we just mentioned Mary DeMuth's website, we2.org. June Hunt, of course, Hope for the Heart. And you think about that. June Hunt and I have talked about everything from physical abuse, verbal abuse. We've talked about sexual abuse. We've talked about abuse sometimes in the church in terms of, might even call it spiritual abuse or toxic churches. As I've said before, this was sort of the idea of Marlon Maddox when he started the program, and it's certainly been what I've tried to do since I've been in this host chair. And that is, no topic is off the table. Right. And there are a lot of these topics that just simply don't get covered very often in even other Christian radio programs. So that's what we do here at Point of View.
One of the things I love about Truth Team Week is the fact that it's a two-way street. We communicate things, and then people communicate things back to us.
And so you have in front of you here this very nice note from one of our listeners in the state of Washington. I thought maybe you might want to read it just so that people can understand the impact that the program is having on people.
This is a great story. So everybody, whatever you're doing, just stop for a minute. This is a great story. I just became a donor at the Liberty level. That's $50 a month. And I wanted all of you to know how much I appreciate your show. I have been listening daily through YouTube for about 6 months now. I live in Washington State, and for about the last 10 years, I have been so unimpressed with what the news stations were covering, I quit watching. 7 years ago, I canceled my television service altogether because I was so disgusted with the media. I didn't feel informed enough to vote accurately, so I'm embarrassed to say I quit voting. Thanks to Point of View, I now feel informed and can actually intelligently discuss political matters with others. I'm 45 years old, a mother, a wife, a small business owner, and I've always considered myself a Christian Democrat. But I now realize that there is nothing in the Democratic platform that I agree with anymore. I can't thank you enough for discussing what really matters with what's going on.
What a great story. What a great story.
That's awesome. We can't say it better than that.
And again,
absolutely.
Sometimes people say, why do you do what you do? Well, it's those kind of letters and notes. And I would be remiss if I weren't mentioning the fact that some people even handwrite these notes out and send them to me. And I go home and share them with my wife. Sometimes I suggest, can't we put this maybe in an appeal letter, just let people know that it's having an impact. But that's why we do what we do. And again, we're encouraging you to recognize that we're trying to educate you about these issues. And we've got an election coming up. And for those of you watching online, you can see that one of the booklets we have is how to vote intelligently, to vote and make your voting count. And that's one of the things she talked about here as well. Another one was she was talking about some of the Democratic platform. We're going to be talking about that, but a lot of that gets back to socialism. There's a little booklet on capitalism and socialism. Sometimes you say, look, I'm just not that political. I'm more concerned about what's happening to my kids. Okay, here's this one on social media. You can see the point. We are trying to address all sorts of issues, your faith, your family, and your freedom. We're going to talk about things that are going to help you be more effective in terms of sharing your faith, in terms of evangelism. We're going to help you know how to defend the Christian worldview and to articulate a Christian worldview. So that's worldview and apologetics. We're going to talk about what's happened in the political realm. We're going to talk about how to raise your kids, talk about how to have better families. That's what we're talking about.
We are looking in the studio for a mini avalanche, okay? We're looking for an avalanche of phone calls.
Time has come.
An avalanche of response to the top of the hour. We are at $11,360 left to go on the match.
We are behind.
That's a lot of money.
Yes.
It's still on the table. Remember, we do not get those funds until they are matched dollar for dollar. This would be a great time to join at that $100 a month level. That'd be a great chance to join at $5 a month, or maybe a $5 single gift because they're all doubled. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Bring on the avalanche, you guys. Give us a call.
Point of View Truth Team.
Oh, I thank God for what you're doing on Point of View. You guys have more influence across this country than I believe any of them in terms of tackling the issues and getting the truth out to Americans. It's getting to the point where truth just is bottled up on every hand. Every time you turn around, there's another big bottleneck against truth. I hope your listeners realize what Point of View is doing and supports Point of View in every possible way you can.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
I always wanted to give because I thought that Point of View really brings a lot of things in out here in the open that that you don't hear anywhere else. And I knew when I was hearing on there, well, I could count on it being something that you could check into it, and the proof would be there. You know, I didn't have to wonder, well, where did they make that stuff up from? I just know that it's going to be facts. That's what I call true journalism and putting the stuff out. I really think that's great.
Point of View Truth Team.
Truth journalism, you know, those used to be redundant phrases, but not so much anymore, right?
That's true.
Brad,
Yeah.
so again, we got a couple of comments here, but we still need some phone calls, and so that's why we encourage you to give us a call. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. A match on the table, and again, you can also go to the website, pointofview.net.
That's right. Every dollar being doubled right now, up to the $11,000 remaining. A friend just checked in with their gift. Thank you for that. It gets doubled. And a comment or two here. Quality of programming is excellent. Kerby is so knowledgeable, and I can't agree more. That we have a host who is God ordained, who really is supposed to be in the chair he's in, I believe, because there is a message on his heart every single day for you and you and you and you and your loved ones in your church and in everything that you're involved in. Because you know what? It is a culture war that we are in.
That's right.
People are trying to say, this is truth, this is the right way to go, and it's not. It's not the right way. It's exactly the opposite many times. And there is so much going on that we need to stand against. And you can help us do that right now with a gift, a generous gift that's matched dollar for dollar. Pointofview.net is the website, pointofview.net, or call us at 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. 5151. Come on, you guys. The time is critical. We really need to hear from you.
Well, we certainly do. And I have my wife and my daughter in there answering the phones.
All right.
And that's why I want to make sure that they have something to do. Otherwise, they're going to say, we'll just stay home and listen to the program. So you have an opportunity to talk with some of the family members, some of the volunteers, some of the staff. And so that's what happens when you call 800-347-5151. We're going to a break. This is a perfect time to call. Noel Bouché will be with us in the next hour. So if you say, well, I just don't want to miss all the things you're talking about, then either go to the website, pointofview.net, or else give us a call at 800-347-5151.
Every single dollar is doubled. Don't forget, and we don't get that money until it's matched. Please help us.
800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
When you give to Point of View, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dies would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kerby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penn Dexter and Kerby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy. But if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Whatever you give will be matched dollar for dollar. Don't put it off, because the clock is running out on the match. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information. about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
You know, if you've listened to Point of View any length of time, you know that one of the things we've been concerned about is what is happening in the schools. And this very good piece that came out in National Review, which is entitled "George Packer Gets Mugged by Reality." And Brad Fisk with me here. And I love this idea of getting mugged by reality. You know, Mayor Koch, who was the mayor in New York one time, was asked after this very liberal judge who always let criminals off was actually mugged. And he said even after being mugged, he wasn't going to change his mind about the criminal justice system. And they said, "Well, Mayor Koch, what do you think we should do?" He said, "Mug him again." I love Mayor Koch. But good. This is the whole thing here. George Packer, if you're not familiar, he's kind of your classic liberal. He's the author of Assassin's Gate and all sorts of other books. He's also written for the New York Times Magazine, the New Yorker. But his latest piece in Atlantic is "When the Culture War Comes for Our Kids." Mm-hmm. Okay, you know we have got a problem when you're kind of classic liberal, a liberal's liberal, says we're in the midst of a culture war and it's ruining our kids. And I'll tell the story real quickly, and we may get into it in the next couple of days. But he talks about the fact that, you know, he's been your classic liberal. His kids were enrolled in the New York City school system. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, he found this school that was ideal for his kids. I'll just talk about the one kid, and that was in kindergarten. But he said by the time we got to the second grade, things began to change. And I love Matthew Conanti, who said, no kidding. He says a new sort of left-wing cultural politics developed toward the close of the previous presidency. Mm-hmm. And, quote, he says, at the heart of the new progressivism was indignation, sometimes rage, about ongoing injustice against groups of Americans who had always been relegated to the outskirts of power and dignity. And so he said all of a sudden, the school was just changing before his very eyes. Parents are opting out of their children from standardized tests because they were structurally biased, they're racist, and all those kinds of things. So then you had no way to test the progress of the students. Then the school, without telling the parents, changed the bathrooms.
Oh, boy, yeah, we've talked about that.
And this guy's a liberal, but he's just all of a sudden going, wait a minute, you know, we went from single sex to gender neutral. And so then he says that even as he, as a liberal, was distraught by the election of Donald Trump, he said, the school system gave even my son no ability to even raise questions because they had studied the civilizations of China and Africa and things like that, but they had never studied, for example, the founding of the Republic. Mm-hmm. And at the end, you know, I love this comment. It says, you know, he's too liberal and too careful to say that he's willing to pass charges against the corruption of the American public school system by radicals. But in a sense, that's exactly what's happening. Yeah. So when your liberal's liberal is getting mugged by reality and telling you that something is seriously wrong with the public school system, that, I think, underscores something that Marlon Maddox, Penna Dexter, even myself have been saying for decades.
It's coming. The freight train's coming, and in many respects, the freight train's here. Yes. It has arrived at the station, and it's not so good. Hey, let me give you a quick update because people are waiting to know I know what's going on. It's Truth Team Week, and we are so excited that you are part of us today and listening to us in the audience, and we're asking you to help us. We're listener-supported radio. We do this 2 times a year. That's it. And much of our budget comes from our generous friends that stand with us year after year after year, and we're asking you to join the Truth Team. You can do that very simply with a gift of any amount, and it will be doubled up to new total $10,000.
Well, we're getting better.
So a third of our match has been cared for so
good.
far.
That's
We're
good.
down to $10,000 between now and the end of the hour to have it matched. And what that means is there's money on the table, and it moves from the total of match money into our budget. In other words, if you give $100, then you release another $100 into our total. If you give $1,000, you release $2,000. You see, that's what it is you get to double your money. 800-347-5151.
You know, we talked about paying it forward just a minute ago when we were talking with Mary DeMuth, and I think about those who paid it forward for one of the individuals that listened to this program and was mugged my reality when she was reading one of the appeal letters we put out, talking about what kind of books would be in your kid's public school.
Right.
And she, with a little bit of, well, I think Kirby's kind of overstated this one, so let me go check out. And she found the book in her daughter's public school library. She then read it and said, actually, Kerby was kind of nice about it. He actually undersold how awful it was. And she goes to the librarian and says, what in this world is this book doing in the library? And she says, well, that's, this is, these are, they don't have to check them out. So she says, well, I want to find out if my daughter's checked them out. And she says, well, you don't have any rights because she has privacy. And she says, this is my daughter. She has no privacy, And it was just this kind of ongoing war that developed. And it was people in the past that paid for her to hear the program, to get the appeal letter, to go out. And then she actually was on the program to just talk about what's happening in the schools. And again, we've, over the last couple of days, suggested if you were in the military, we certainly would encourage you to call. I would like to, this hour, especially as we're going to be talking about human trafficking, we're going to talk about pornography, we're talking about, of course, the last hour, sexual abuse. If you're concerned about some of that and what's being taught in the classrooms today, I really would encourage you to give a call. I went in just a minute ago to say hi to my wife, and she was on the phone, which is a good thing. So some of the people in my family are taking phone calls today. Some of the staff are taking phone calls. Some of the volunteers are, but I still see 3 or 4 of them talking.
Oh, there's room for you. Yes,
I would rather them to be talking to you on the phone rather than to talking to each other. So we need to get your phone call right now.
A gift of any amount. It could be a single gift or a monthly gift. It all will be doubled up to the $10,000 mark. And we're just simply asking you to respond. Pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Or you can call us at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151.
So again, when we come back in just a minute, we're going to be joined in studio by our good friend Noel Bouché, and he's been on the program with us before. He's a great big picture person, Brad, as you well know, and help us understand kind of some of the progress we've made over the last couple of decades on this whole issue of sex and sexuality and sex education and the concerns about social media, which is something we write about, and pornography, which we talk about. Also, the very vexing issue of sexual trafficking. So I really want to have people right now call so that they won't miss any of that. And you have, even as you worked at Focus on the Family, had some of these programs that you and Dr. Dobson did that just make you want to go home and cry because they're so horrific.
It's absolute evil with a capital E. I mean, I don't know how else to say, but evil, we're to call evil and sin, evil and sin. And, so many people, they hear, this one listener says, I hear things not heard elsewhere. That's all I said. Yeah, I hear you're doing things I'm not hearing anywhere else. Will you help us to continue to do that, please? 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. There is lots of room right now. The phones are pretty much open for you to call. You will not get a busy signal. You can also give at pointofview.net.
Pointofview.net is a great place to go, and I would encourage you to do that now because we're going to be talking with Noel Bouché. Again, that number, 800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
A major campaign issue is health care. Americans are upset with the high cost of health care, and although many candidates are promoting the idea of Medicare for all, it won't bring down cost and has little chance of passing anyway. So we should be asking if there are any ways to bring down the cost of health care. Fortunately, we have some companies and states that have been able to do so with relatively minor changes. Sean Flynn describes two of these changes. The first solution is price tags. As I've discussed in previous commentaries, it's nearly impossible for people with health insurance to find out what a procedure will cost and how much will be covered by insurance. When patients have been able to comparison shop, LASIK eye surgery is a good example, competition has brought the cost down. A second solution is deductible security. This pairs an insurance policy that has an annual deductible with a health savings account that is funded with an amount equal to the annual deductible. The sponsor could either be a private employer like Whole Foods or a government like the state of Indiana. Since the amount is equal to the annual deductible, participants have money to pay for out-of-pocket expenses. This not only provides them with cash to spend on medical expenses, but it also makes them participants. They get to keep unspent health savings account balances. That causes them to be more conscious of cost in comparison shop. The state of Indiana tracked health care spending and discovered that these behavioral changes resulted in 35% lower spending compared to traditional health insurance, and they also found that employees were still going in for mammograms, annual checkups, and other forms of preventive medicine at the same rate. If we want to lower health care costs, these are two time-tested solutions that will achieve it. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
Point of View, Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Back once again, we have in studio with us Noel Bouché with Pure Hope. We'll talk more with him in just a minute. But we are in the midst of Truth Team, and it's Truth Team Week, and Brad Fisk with us, and we've whittled it down a little bit more, but we still have room for so many individuals.
We do. Remember, last hour I mentioned we had a room for 5 Century Club. That's $100 a month. We have 2 of those gone so far. We have 3 more to go. $8,400, and that's it on the match. So we're about halfway, thereabouts.
Yes.
So here's the phone number if you want to make that number go even down some more. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Every dollar you give up to the $8,000 will be doubled, and what a great time to give.
And again, Noel Bouché in studio with us. He is with Pure Hope, pursuing a world free of sexual exploitation and brokenness. Individual that graduated from South Dakota State University. He's a quarterback there, by the way, on the football team. You
I
can
read
watch
about
some
that.
of those.
I read your bio.
Yeah,
that was pre-internet. I'm surprised you could find anything, but I'm glad you
and
did.
you can watch the YouTube video that's still up there after all these years.
All these
graduated
years.
from the University of Texas School of Law, was a litigator, but always had a desire to really kind of take on this issue of sexual trafficking. Joined Pure Hope in 2008. And this is a power couple because his wife, Dr. Vanessa Bouché, is kind of one of these leading authorities. You see her quoted sometimes in some of these major magazines on this issue of sexual trafficking. But you began to realize, maybe I need to go upstream a little bit. We can look at sexual trafficking, but maybe we need to go back and look at sexual brokenness, abuse, and even this issue of pornography. So give us a little bit of your history, because I think it helps us understand how to really attack this huge problem that's so overwhelming.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And we've talked about this on your show before of how you do ultimately have to go upstream, because that's where healing happens, and justice flows out of healing, out of redemption. That's what we believe. And that's what we discovered. My wife and I were, exposed to the reality, maybe like some of your listeners will be today, of human trafficking and globally, how pervasive it is and then creeps into our lives, not just in maybe the clothes we wear with labor trafficking and slave labor that goes into these supply chains, but also sexual exploitation all around us. And we tend to think some of these things are over there across the globe, and they're right in our own communities. And that's really what impacted us. We discovered, man, this is everywhere. So, how does our heart respond to this? What is God directing us to do? And, in my case, I was a young kid out of college, and I said, well, I want to fight injustice. I want to do justice. So how do you do that? You go get, I guess, a law degree and join the justice system. But that was before, I really realized justice is not a system. It's a virtue. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the takeaway for many of us who are exposed to, come to grips with the reality that this exploitation happens all around us, is that we all have a role. We all have a place. No matter where we are, no matter what our profession is, we have a place. And that's something that you've brought out so well on the show. But, we live in a world where 40 million people are enslaved one way or another, according to the International Labor Organization.
Unbelievable.
And 25 million in labor trafficking and over 5 million in the global sex trade. And that includes here in the U.S., that includes minors and children. And I think that's something that, doesn't feel like a victory. And it's not, because it's a severe injustice. We have around us our brothers and sisters.
That's true.
Around the globe suffering, and that moves us. But there is good news. And this is kind of what we want to talk about. There's hope. And there's actually been a lot of traction, since I discovered, man, it's not just as a lawyer you fight this, it's as a person, which led to my journey to Pure Hope. I'm like, man, we can't only do so much with policy in the courtrooms, investigating, prosecuting. We need transformation. We need social change. We need healing internally. And that's what we do at Pure Hope, of course, is lead people to that healing. But that journey is a personal one. It leads you through all kinds of winding peaks and valleys, and you start to see our dependence is on the Lord, and it's on collaboration, which is one thing that, we brought up. You had Mary DeMuth on earlier. Mm-hmm. And of course, last time I think I was here, I was with Mary. Yeah. And we talked about the connections of how human trafficking is connected to, say, the porn industry, how porn actually drives demand for human trafficking and is a form of trafficking. And so all of us are touched by this. And then, of course, what leads us to porn, what leads someone into the porn industry, what leads us to consuming porn, perhaps moving into addiction, is abuse so often in childhood. And of course, that's Mary's story of overcoming. But these are the things that you do at Point of View so well, is we start to understand how things are connected. We start to see the integration. And, for me, that's huge. Integration is, the Lord created us whole and for shalom. It's disintegration that is the reality of brokenness, and that is evil's goal. And so when we integrate concepts, integrate topics like you do at Point of View, when we integrate at ministries like Pure Hope, where we're connecting parents with parenting well in a sexualized culture as a means of doing justice, that's when we see victory.
And again, that's at purehope.net. And Brad, again, he's got great resources there on that website.
I got a question. Could you illustrate, without using real names, a victory? A recent victory, somewhere where we won, those of us who oppose pornography and who oppose trafficking?
I'll give you a couple real quick, because they're different people around the world, and yet they're all connected, and they're all stories of overcoming. My wife and I have a new venture that our ministry and our education, our research has kind of brought about, and we're focusing on India. And we have now an enterprise where we are creating dignified employment for women coming out of the brothel districts. And our employees there come from all kinds of backgrounds. We're trafficked as children. We're lured into, through force or fraud, into the brothel district, and now they have dignified employment. And the dignity of having a uniform to go to work in is transforming their lives. Now, we're doing the same thing here in the U.S. with survivors who are coming out of trafficking here in the U.S., trafficked online across the country, and now working with us and coming to a place where the Lord is restoring them. And this goes to the film called The Heart of Man, which you had me on to talk about. Yeah. We have produced a film that said, man, this trafficking happens. Women, children exploited primarily. Men often are consuming. But what about these men? Who's trafficking? Who's pimping? Who's buying this? Well, it's broken people, because hurt people hurt people. Yeah. But free people free people. In The Heart of Man, we look at how God frees us from our shame. And we've got thousands and thousands of testimonies of men especially who have been freed up from the brokenness. In fact, I've got one guy, I'll tie it to the Global Network real quick. We released the film. This is a guy on the East Coast, called us up and said, I just saw the film, and for the first time in my life, I realized that I was sexually abused as a child. These memories were completely repressed in my reality.
Wow.
The next week, he said, I just realized that all of the brokenness I've been stuck in the last couple of years, buying sex from prostituted women around the world, my international business, are because of my abuse. I'm now finding healing because I know God is not rejecting me. He's for me. He loves me as a son, and he's purifying me.
Praise
and it's
God.
transformed family.
Wow.
So these things are global. They come right down to our heart. And that's the hope that we have in Jesus.
You know, one of the things I love, Brad, about what they have at purehope.net is, first of all, right there is a pocket guide to talking about sex. There's a curriculum. There's information for various individuals. There is, of course, the quest, as well as they have a magazine. They have, of course, the videos. We have just a minute ago the movie. I mean, they're just attacking it in so many different ways, and that's just that kind of multifaceted approach, and that's kind of what we do here at Point of View, because we have commentaries, we have radio, we have video clips, we encourage people to go to different movies and things like that, and if nothing else, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have Noel on, because he's a kindred spirit, understands how to do all this kind of stuff.
That's right. And let me remind you, lest we forget, that in the midst of all this, and I love the victory stories, love them, we need to hear from you. We have 33 minutes. And we would need to get matched $8,400. $8,400, dollar for dollar match. That means every dollar you give up to that amount will be doubled by a friend of the ministry. And you can make your gift count right now at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Or you can give us a call at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. 5151.
I want to hear from some of you. You don't have to actually share this with the listeners, with the callers and things like that, but some of you maybe are experiencing that issue of sexual brokenness, or maybe in one way or another you've dealt with this. You don't necessarily have to say that to those people that you're pledging, but I just want to hear from some of you, because if you say, I'm glad that you're addressing this. Yes. This is not addressed on most Christian radio programs.
That's correct.
We usually do not hear people talking about sexual abuse. We don't necessarily hear people talking about sexual brokenness, but as I've said before, no issues off the table. That's why you're on with us on a regular basis, because we think these are issues that are really important. And when you used to work at Focus on the Family, Dr. Dobson had that same idea as well,
He
that
did.
Those were things that needed to be addressed.
And we had warnings at the beginning of the broadcast. Move the small kids away from the radio, because what we're going to be talking about is heavy-duty stuff. And, he had the courage to do that, and you have the courage to step out. I mean, I can't imagine having your job. I go crazy. Because I'm not going to say publicly what I would want to do, but it's not nice. Seriously, I have 9 kids and 23 grandkids, so that gives you a little context. I get really upset at people who misuse children in any way, let alone sexually. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your organization and for your ministry. God bless you.
And again, we will come back and talk a bit more about some of the things that are at purehope.net, but we need to get 4 more phone calls, and you can go to pointofview.net, or most importantly, those 4 phone calls can go to 800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled, 800-347-5151.
When you give to Point of View, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dies would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kerby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penn Dexter and Kerby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy. But if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Whatever you give will be matched dollar for dollar. Don't put it off, because the clock is running out on the match. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, and because it's our final half hour, first of all, you're going to have a chance to still hear from Noel Bouché, but that final half hour is the sort of crunch time, if you will, Brad Fisk, because indeed we have a match on the table, and I don't want to leave any of it behind.
I don't want to leave any behind either. So we have two numbers you need to understand and work with us on here. 80 $8,400. That's $8,400 remains in the match. And we have 25 minutes to get it done. 25-minute deadline, and we don't want to leave any of this money on the table because as you give your $100 a month, it becomes $200 a month. Your $15 single gift becomes $30. Every dollar is doubled, whether it's a single gift or a monthly gift. And you can do that right now at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net, or give us a call. We have lots of phones open right now at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151.
Or you, of course, could go to the website, pointofview.net. That also gives you a link to purehope.net. And Noel Bouché, let me come to you for just a minute. When we talk about human trafficking, it's one of those ones where you can actually get some good coalitions. I remember the other day we were talking with Victor Boutros, and he said, I was in a meeting, and in any other meeting I've ever been in, it's always who's on one side, who's on the other. Everybody's on the same side on this one, so you get some alliances with people that you probably would never have worked with in other issues, because really, who's on the other side of human trafficking? So that's really a good thing and makes your job a little easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is interesting. It's everyone is against human trafficking, and so it creates these alliances that can be really productive, and they have been. I mean, over the last 20 years has been the time frame in which there's been awareness, and then we started with federal legislation, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, along with the Palermo Protocol, which is the UN Convention. And all of that really came because there was momentum of a problem growing, which people saw, which was when the Berlin Wall fell, you had chaos and a lot of sexual exploitation pouring across the world, and you also had the internet. So all of a sudden, we say there's a problem here, and that legislation really kicked off a really cool period where we saw people across the political spectrum, but also different segments of society, including, followers of Jesus, really coming together, especially in the aughts as this was new, to say, look, this is a problem, but also we need to be very innovative, prayerful, and courageous in how we address this. And a lot of NGOs have led the way, and we've seen a lot of progress. We've seen legislative progress, but we've seen social change, and we've seen different pockets of society recognize that we need to address the fact that not only are people being exploited, there's root causes, and the sexualization of culture is one of them because of the abuse and the trauma that creates. And so there's been a lot more focus on victim care. Texas is leading the way. We're in Texas right now, and it's great legislation. Other states are following that lead. And, we've seen it even in the headlines. I mean, the Jeffrey Epstein case was in the headlines over the last few, and that's an example. 10 years ago, here's someone who got a sweetheart deal. It was, but a predator, an exploiter, a trafficker, in this case, even of minors. And 10 years later, because of the momentum that we've seen in society and a lot of Christians leading that charge, you saw charges being brought in a real way. And of course, it ended tragically, most tragically for the victims, the dozens of young women that were exploited, and also, ended in death in the perpetrator's life. I see Proverbs 7, 8, and 9 kind of playing itself out there, but there is hope. There's hope for redemption. We have story after story. I think that's a cool thing in our society right now. We're seeing survivors of trafficking now in leadership roles.
Yes, we are.
In government, in NGOs, and nonprofits and ministries across the country. And for me, that is maybe the greatest picture of redemption, where you see people who have been victimized now are overcomers and thriving, and we get to work with a lot of people like that. So
I know Brad wants to talk about some practical things, but one that just surfaced when you were talking about that is we now are sensitizing people to, if you see something, say something. I think we had a caller just a minute ago talking about truckers against trafficking. There was a story the other day about somebody that was actually booking a reservation for airline, and they noticed these two girls. They were only getting a one-way ticket. They were going to New York, and something didn't sound right, and they prevented them from being trafficked. So really, one of the application points is if something doesn't look right, it may not be right.
Exactly, and that campaign is extremely effective. If you see something, say something. Now, we have to be able to see something first, and that's what a lot of the education, a lot of what we do is about. Is having eyes to see what's actually going on. And so, this is what we're focused on.
So what can the ordinary man or woman do? What can the young person do? They don't like sex trafficking. They're against it. They want it to go away completely. What can we do to help in this battle.
Yeah, the good news is, like I said, 20 years on in this kind of modern movement against it, the resources are proliferating. And so wherever you are, you have a role to play. This is scriptural, right? We are all called to do justice, to love purity, and to make a difference. And we had a guy call in who's a trucker, apparently. Truckers Against Trafficking is a site you can go to. Every industry has its own. Flight attendants, nurses. Right now, we really see the medical field is a place where the training has to be up, and it's happening right now because nurses and doctors are going to come up against victims, and so they have to know what to see. If you have someone who doesn't seem to have agency and decision making when they're coming to you, and they have injuries that you can't explain, this person might be in a trafficking situation. So teachers, anyone, no matter where you are, you're front line. There's a resource called the Human Trafficking Hotline, where if you see something, you should call it 888-3737-888. I've called it. Because as I've been in this, I've seen things walking down the street. I've seen things coming out of hotels. I've seen things where that just doesn't look right, and I see something that's a red flag. I'm going to call it and put this tip in, and hopefully alert law enforcement through that. But, every one of us has a call. And, of course, at Pure Hope, our ministry starts with parents and other influencers, so pastors. And we live in this sexualized culture where the sexually exploitative elements are not just happening online or in brothels or in hotels or on the street. They're happening right on our phones and in our pockets. And so we as parents and pastors and teachers need to be equipped to really train up the next generation to live in this environment. And Brad, you kind of talked about this earlier, how we don't normally want to talk about these topics, but evil doesn't want us to talk about these topics.
That's right.
Now, our own fears come into play, but Scripture talks about sex. It talks about exploitation. It talks about redemption all the way through from Genesis to Revelation, and that's what we want to do is equip people for that.
The wrong response is to put your head in the sand and ignore it. And we don't want to do that.
We don't want to ignore it. We want to break the power of the secret in our lives.
Marlon Maddox used to talk about the head in the sand club, and that is not something we are all about here, just the opposite.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things I want to maybe put a challenge on the table, I've challenged some of you to say, look, maybe I've been affected by sexual exploitation, sexual brokenness, or maybe you're just on the outside looking in and say, I just hate sexual trafficking. And I'm just glad you guys are talking about this. This is something I don't hear very often, especially from a Christian point of view, because a lot of times we just want to put these guys in jail, but here we're hearing words like redemption, restoration. Those are biblical terms, and that comes from Pure Hope. And some of you might say, I don't even know how to talk to my kids about sex. Well, again, there's a pocket guide to talking about sex. There's some great videos there at Pure Hope. You might say, you mentioned a movie. Well, you can go to YouTube and watch the movie if you didn't have a chance to see it in the major theaters. So it's all available there. And these are resources we're putting in your hands so that you can be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And Brad, that's really what this is all about. People sometimes say, why should I support Point of View? So that I can equip you, and also we can equip others to have a sphere of influence. Noel Bouché is the kind of person you'd like to bring around every dinner table to talk to the kids about sex and do it in a way that would be really great. He's the kind of person you'd like to bring to your city council and talk about this issue of sexual trafficking.
Right.
But the reality is you can take his material and you can be a sphere of influence.
He's a resourcer, absolutely,
right.
Like so many people on Point of View are. And, we're down to 17 minutes, and this match challenge is not done yet. We want to talk about that for just a minute. And if just 14 of you would come in at the $50 a month level, that's where you get the mug, the Absolutely Yeti mug, which is really awesome, and you get the booklets, and you get to, that's $600 going to the total. And if we just had 14 of those, we'd be done. We'd have it all finished. We have plenty of time to do it. We have 5 lines open right now, so plenty of room for you to get in at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. 5151.
And when we come back from the break, I want to ask Noel what he might say to our listeners about why they should support Point of View. Give him, as if he needs even a minute to think about this, but give him a chance to think about what he might want to say. And while we go to the break, that's the time to call.
Absolutely.
Because I've noticed one of the problems with Noel Bouché is people love what he has to say. They love how articulate he is. And they don't call because they said, I don't want to miss a minute of it. So that's why you want to call right now. And it seems like, what do we have, 7?
It's 7 lines. All the lines are open right now.
I'm getting disappointed here.
No. Let's be encouraged because God's going to come through
and help
us meet that deadline. 800-347-5151. 5151. Looking for 7 of you right now to go to the phones, please. 800-347-5151. We do not want to leave any of that money on the table. It all needs to go into the total.
And again, that's a lot of money on the table. I know if I left that money on the table and say, no, you can walk away with it, we'd go, what? And so that's what we're doing right now. So let's encourage your phone calls right now. 800-347-5151. I know our listeners always wait to the end, so I guarantee to you that they're doing it again.
It's okay, but hey, there's room for you.
800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. You can give there, but you can also find the link to purehope.net. We'll continue with Noel Bouché, but we need to hear from you. 800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled. We'll be right back.
Point of View Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio, and we air Point of View on AFR, American Family Radio. Folks, Kerby Anderson and the team there deserve your financial support during this time. They don't ask a lot, but when they do ask, they need your financial support to, make the ministry whole, to keep promoting the gospel and the truth about what's going on in our country. We consider them kindred spirits and partner in ministry at Point of View with us here at American Family Radio. So if you would, write them a check, give them a donation with your credit card, whatever you can do to help them keep the cause of Christ before the public on their radio program, Point of View.
And again, Tim Wildman might even just to have a shout out to some of our listeners on American Family radio stations. We'd love to hear from you. And again, Tim Wildman's been on this program. I've been on his program. I was just in Tupelo, Mississippi not so long ago and joined them around today's issues. And again, we are kindred spirit in that regard. So, Brad, we still are coming to crunch time. I do see some with phones up to their ear. I see some waiting for the phones to ring.
That's
so
right.
I think we need
have plenty
to get
of
some
open
more
lines, though, because
Yes.
we have phones in other parts of the building as
That's
well.
true. I don't even know what's going on over there.
So what do you think of Point of View?
There we go.
Well, love,
Easy.
love,
Softball.
yeah, it's a softball, right? Love, point of view, love, and I'll speak from the ministry's perspective, what you have done over the decades, providing a platform for us to do what we do, what we're called and anointed to do in ministering, but then also connecting us with people around the country who need the ministry. I mean, that's what you do is you bridge that divide, and that's what radio allows, to be able to scale this. And that's why I think, a gift to Point of View Radio is not only doing ministry, not only are you advancing the kingdom, but you're doing something that's needed, because right now, so many of people are listening in their cars, right? And, you need a word of encouragement. You need some knowledge when you get that windshield time. You got a long commute, you're trucking across the country, you're dropping the kids off. Right now, you're getting ministry, you're getting fed, you're finding out about resources you wouldn't have known otherwise. And that we know from all the testimonies that we've shared together, and that over the decades you've seen is transformative effect on lives. So a gift here goes so much farther, because it does scale. It takes ministries out to places they wouldn't have been. And that's where life happens. In our parenting ministry, we often think as parents, when it comes to talking to our kids about sex and God's design and living in this sexually exploitative digital age, we think that we got to have that sex talk, that one-time talk, and cover every topic when they hit puberty or something, and then we're going to be good. We got past it and everyone's happy. Well, that's not usually the case. We can't do everything in one conversation. In Pure Hope, we say we need to create ongoing dialogue with our kids that's age appropriate, but it's using teachable moments. It's not about setting up just the right, perfect lighting and time of day for that hard conversation. It's using teachable moments in the car. Song lyrics come up. You find something online, a headline in the newspaper. You're sitting around the dinner table. That's where ministry happens, and that's what Point of View does. Right now, people are in the car getting ministered to while they're doing what they do and going about their day, and that's what I love. And I love to be able to come on, as a ministry, as a guest, and not only share what we've learned and what the Lord's revealing, but do it in a way that I know is reaching someone right now who's like, I just needed to hear that. That's amazing.
I don't know this for sure, but I have a sense right now, very strong sense, that somebody listening to us this past hour is involved in some way in sex trafficking and pornography, or something is going on in their life and they're very, very uncomfortable. I just have a sense that they're going to be able to get help. They're going to go to the website. They're going to check out the resources. There is going to be changed lives as a result of this hour. Even if one child is saved, one child is protected, and they're able to live a normal life, is worth everything to me, and hopefully to you and to you and to you.
Let's maybe hear just from somebody that has actually benefited from Point of View.
Point of View Truth Team.
I can't go to Washington. I can't do those things. So the only way that I can help is the way that God has provided for me, and to give some of that back to you guys. So like you said, partnering with Point of View, because, you can't do it alone. Thank you very much for what you guys do. Believe me, it's a needed thing, and I just hope everybody certainly would get on the bandwagon with you.
I can't afford not to support you. Point of View gives me a voice, and I just appreciate you. And I've been here listening for years, so I thank you, and I do. Again, I said I can't afford not to support you, because I want you to keep going.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
My husband and I are your supporters. We just really appreciate the show and the people you bring on.
Point of View Truth Team.
Back once again, Noel Bouché in studio with us for another minute or two. And one of the things that Brad was talking about is maybe a life has changed. You've seen some life changes, haven't you?
Yeah, well, we've seen lives changed, freed from the power of the secret, freed from the brokenness and the trauma that sexual brokenness, plays in our lives. We've seen men transformed and families transformed through that, women freed. And I'm thinking of a story right now, and this might be someone who's listening, right now as you're driving or sitting at home. But we had a parent just recently write into the ministry and say, look, our small group went through your Quest Parenting in a Sexualized Culture small group resource. And it prepared me. I didn't know how much it prepared me and how much good it was doing until my 6-year-old daughter came home. She had just gotten off the school bus, and she said, Mommy, I have to tell you something. And the mom knew exactly that this was going to be something serious, and that this other child was touching her between her legs, and that there were things on the devices, pictures being shown. And the mom said, if I hadn't gone through Quest, I would not have been in a place to respond with grace. But even before that, because of what my husband and I had talked about as parents, we had been having just little conversations about always talking, always having trust, always coming to Mommy and Daddy, never holding anything back. We will never yell at you. You won't be in trouble for telling us the truth. That cultivates a culture of grace in the home. And so, we see that across the country. And again, because that's evil's greatest objective, to keep us in the dark. Behind masks, when we first sinned, what do? We made masks. We hid ourselves from God's presence. And when we can come together, talk about topics that are hard, but look at them with biblical truth, be encouraged. We can do that over the radio. You see transformation.
We're in a spiritual battle. We are in a battle, and it's a war going on. And even right now, there may be barriers, but I'm asking you to overcome it right now with your phone call and support. We only do this twice a year. 800-347-5151. Do you want to make a difference for eternity? Would you like your gift to count for that little girl or that little boy or that family? Would you like to make that work? $7,280 remains on the match. $7,200. Just a few gifts at $100 a month, a couple of gifts at $50 a month, a single gift of $10 a month. All the gifts count. The amounts between you and God. It's not our deal. It's your deal. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. And you can give on the website. Write this down, pointofview.net, pointofview.net.
And again, we are getting calls right now from South Carolina, Arkansas, California. Some are one-time gifts. Others are $50 a month gift. We'll let you decide how to respond, but we have about 7,000 left, and we have about 5 lines open. So we are waiting for your phone call. And in just a minute, we're going to go off the air, but we'll still take those phone calls.
We will indeed. We got till the end of the day. Please tell your friends. We don't want to leave any of that $7,000 on the table. The phone number is 800-347-5151.
Noel Bouché, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to the next opportunity.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Kerby.
And let me just mention, tomorrow is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, Gary Bauer will be with us, but we are down to crunch time. We need to hear from you, even though we're going off the air in about 20 seconds. Take the time to make a phone call, 800-347-5151. At any time, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. And, Brad, we still have a mountain to climb.
$7,000 plus. Please give us a hand, won't you? Don't leave any of it behind. 800-347-5151.
We'll be back tomorrow.
When you give to Point of View, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dies would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kerby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penna Dexter and Kerby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy. But if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Whatever you give will be matched dollar for dollar. Don't put it off, because the clock is running out on the match. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.